Hello, good morning. Today I'd like to show you what the course 200 Phrasal Verbs course looks like from the inside. So I will show you the video book. I will also briefly talk to you about how you're going to learn with the course. Only 3 phrasal verbs per day, but please remember we pay attention to quality, not quantity. So my goal is to make you memorize these 3 phrasal verbs and actively use them in a conversation. So we don't want you just to learn them by heart. We want you to actually use them on a daily basis in conversations, in emails, at meetings. So that's the goal of this course. So let's have a look at the course. Firstly, video book, shall we? So video book is the core of your work with the course because everything is linked here. This ebook is interactive. So let's have a look at it. Of course, first you're going to have some introduction. This is the sample. So you will have some weekly plan. So literally every day you sit down and you know what exactly you're going to do. So you don't have to select what you're going to learn. You don't have to think which material, which books to open. You just go according to the plan and you just tick the classes off. To make it fun, to make it easier, I've created this kind of progress monitoring page so you can actually tick all the days off to basically feel motivated, to feel this drive to carry on with the course. And now let's have a look at week 1. Of course, we will have just a few examples. So every day you have 3 phrasal verbs to learn. Firstly, have a look, you have the phrasal verb with the Polish translation. Then you have this definition. For example, if we put something off, we postpone it for later. And I really want you to pay attention because this is the core. So very often we have these simple verbs in our mind like postpone, cancel, and this is something that you will be basically doing in your mind. So you will be paraphrasing. You want to use postpone, but then you will use put off. You want to use cancel, but then maybe once you revise all these phrasal verbs, you will use the phrasal verb call off. So sometimes you might even know these phrasal verbs, but the idea again of this course is not to make you learn them by heart, but you will learn full sentences thanks to which you will finally use them in a conversation. So we will transform this passive range of vocabulary you've got into this active range of vocabulary. So you have the definition, then you have an example of a sentence with this phrasal verb. Let's put this task off for tomorrow, and you have some translation. So the first page is basically to get familiar with the phrasal verbs, to think whether you actually know these phrasal verbs or not, read it aloud possibly, and then we have some short exercise. Firstly, you have some links to fragments in movies where you can basically see how these phrasal verbs work in this living language. So you will probably recognize a lot of movie series where these phrasal verbs will be used. So I think this is some kind of fun aspect which will also make you memorize these phrasal verbs. Then exercise 2, paraphrase. So you have 3 sentences to be paraphrased by means of the phrasal verbs you've learned today. So for example, I'm afraid we have to cancel this meeting will be changed into I'm afraid we have to call this meeting off. Or would it be possible to postpone this decision will be changed into would it be possible to put this decision off. So again, I want to give you this idea how you can use these phrasal verbs in these business sentences, because the more sentences with phrasal verbs you will see, you will do, you will learn, the more likely you will be to use these phrasal verbs in your own sentences at work during meetings. Okay, so have a look. These are very nice business English sentences that you can also learn by heart and right away use in a conversation. Then exercise 3, speaking writing exercise. So now I want you to create some sentences, some answers with the phrasal verbs you've learned, because if you create your own sentences, if you associate these phrasal verbs with, well, your own life and work situations, I believe it's going to be much easier for you to memorize these phrasal verbs again. So you have some questions. For example, what kind of activities do you often put off in your professional or private life? Of course, remember that you can print this ebook and you can give the answers in writing, but also you have this interactive version of this video book where you can basically type the answer on your laptop, on your tablet, so you will basically be typing on your keyboard, for example, if you don't want to print it. And that's day 1. So this is more or less what it looks like every day. So every day you will have different types of phrasal verbs. They will also be categorized, pay attention. So before you had meetings, then you might have category like daily work, so phrasal verbs you can generally use in your daily work. Then, for example, you will have phone calls, you will have small talk. So the idea of this course also is to make you learn these most common phrasal verbs, most practical phrasal verbs, and I've categorized them so that you don't have to select which phrasal verbs you need, which phrasal verbs will be useful for you. Everything is basically handed to you on a silver platter. So the only thing you have to do is basically get down to work and learn only 3 phrasal verbs per day. On the one hand, it seems very little, right? But again, we want you to use them actively in a conversation. So I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. I want you to enjoy the process of learning vocabulary, of improving your range of vocabulary. And then at the end, so let's say Saturday, that would be, you have this test yourself section. So first of all, you have a link to the Quizlet app where you will basically be revising all these sentences with phrasal verbs from this week in the Quizlet application. And also you have a link to the recordings I've recorded for you. This is also a great way to test yourself, to revise the sentences, because firstly you listen to a sentence in the Polish language, you have a few seconds to to translate this sentence, say it aloud, and then you listen to me reading this sentence for you. So, for example, when you're cooking, when you're driving, when you're walking around the park, you can always do this phrasal verbs revision by means of these audio files I've prepared for you, or you can simply use this Quizlet app. And now let me show you how it works. Of course, the best idea is to do it on your mobile phone, but well, let me show you how it goes. So we always want to learn from Polish into English, not the other way around, because if you see a sentence in English, then you usually understand, you know the word, but the difficulty is to translate from the Polish language into the English one. So have a look. Przełóżmy to zadanie na jutro, and then you say it aloud and you check the answer. Let's put this task off for tomorrow, shall we? And then next one, the meeting has been cancelled. Once again, the idea of this Quizlet application revision is that you basically revise these sentences as much as possible so that they can get stuck in your mind, so that you could start using them automatically without thinking. And I generally believe this idea of flashcards, fiszki, is very pleasurable because you keep revising the sentences. Of course, you can say them aloud additionally, so you also practice this speaking aspect. So once you basically revise these phrasal verbs in the Quizlet application, once you listen to the audio files I've created for you, so you can practice your pronunciation and intonation at the same time, then time for some exercise, sentence translation. So you have very useful practical sentences to be translated once again, so that you can memorize the use of these 15 phrasal verbs you've learned this week. And again, the more sentences like that you will revise, you will create, you will translate, the more likely, the more probable it is that you will be able to create similar sentences while speaking. I hope you agree on this one with me. So after doing this sentence translation, you also have some small exercise regarding prepositions. Remember that every second week you will also have a video class to be watched here. You can't see it because this is week 1, but every second week you will also have a link to a video class with me where we will be basically revising all these 2 weeks by means of some small talk dialogues, by means of paraphrasing. So we will be reading the dialogues together, practicing pronunciation and intonation at the same time, but also you will see whether you remember the phrasal verbs you've learned or whether you still need some practice, some revision by means of the Quizlet app, for example. And now the last thing I'd like to show you, just to sum it up, have a look. This is my formula for 200 phrasal verbs. So this is how you're going to learn with my course. So let's sum it up. 3 phrasal verbs per day with synonyms, definitions, examples, translations. Then you have fragments from series and movies to see how a given phrasal verb works in this living language, this fun aspect of phrasal verbs. Then you have some practical exercises, paraphrasing and writing, journaling exercise so that you can memorize these phrasal verbs even better. Then you move on to this revision in the Quizlet app. So you revise the flashcards, you learn all these sentences by heart to be able to use them right away in a conversation. Then you move on to these audio files, so you can practice your pronunciation or you can test yourself by translating these sentences from Polish into English aloud. And then lastly, every second week you have these video classes where we practice some small talk dialogues using the phrasal verbs you've learned. So I hope that sounds like a plan. Of course, remember, you also have this Facebook group where you can ask any questions, whether a given sentence is correct, how to use a given phrasal verb. So I'm there to support you in this journey. So I hope you like the idea. I hope you like my formula for learning and using actively, most importantly, these 200 phrasal verbs in business English. And once again, if you like the idea, if you'd like to learn effectively in a pleasurable way, but most importantly, not spending more than 15 or 20 minutes a day, you can have a look at the opinions of the participants of the course and see what their impressions are, what their learning process looks like, whether they can see some effects or not. So you can have a look at it below. See you on board.